Hello and welcome to the Rising Coaches Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Bender, and today's episode is brought to you in part by Boost Analytics. Boost is a one-of-a-kind technology company that provides NBA caliber analytics and video analysis to select number of men's and women's Division I basketball programs. Boost uses artificial intelligence and natural language technologies to make analytics more user-friendly and to translate complex data into easy-to-read coaching insights. The Boost platform was built by data scientists and basketball experts with decades of experience both on the collegiate and NBA levels. To learn more about Boost and how your team can gain a competitive edge, head over to their website at www.boostsport.ai and join the fastest growing team in college basketball analytics. Today's special guest, Jamy Bechler. He is a author of multiple books. I think he's written 4 so far, including The Bus Trip, Leadership Playbook, and most recently, The Captain. He's a host of Success is a Choice podcast, a professional speaker, and trains organizations in creating championship cultures. Beckler spent 20 years as a college basketball coach and administrator, and he has worked with multiple businesses and teams all the way from the high school, collegiate, and all the way up to the NBA levels. Coach Beckler, thanks for taking the time to join us on the podcast today.
Absolutely, Brian. I appreciate you having me. I love what you guys do. So excited to talk with you today.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time more than you know, and give us a little bit more on the background. Or someone asked you at a party or on the street, "Hey, what is it that you do for a job?" What would you say?
Yeah, it's a great question. I try to help coaches be better coaches. I help leaders be better leaders, and ultimately, the goal is not so that they can be better, but so that the people that they impact can be better. That the student athletes in particular can not only be better student athletes, but one day they can be better adults. And I would love for your coaches to be better in the X's and O's and win more games. That's not my goal. That's a secondary part of it. What I want is for the people that they have an influence over to be better, because most of us got into coaching, let's face it, not to be rich and famous, but to help others or to give back to the game that we love so much.
Definitely. So how does one become, what would you call yourself, a leadership culture, a culture builder, a consultant of some sort, an author? How does one come about that?
Yeah, well, I was a college basketball coach for about 20 years. And then I was a high school athletic director for 2 years at a school in Indiana, 5th largest gymnasium in the world for high school. It seated over 7,000. Nobody has won more boys basketball state titles in Indiana than the school that I was at, Marion High School. And so I have the background in basketball. I have a background in athletics. I've always had a passion for leadership. And so eventually it was a situation where a couple opportunities arose and I was able to dive into this professional speaking, look at the podcasting, look at leadership consulting, essentially have my own business and be an entrepreneur, which really just means you're unemployed or self-employed, depending on the day. And so I had the opportunity to kind of jump in to the deep end with both feet, and we took advantage of that. And I've always had a passion for leadership, and this was a way to maybe spread that out a little bit more and maybe have a chance to use some of the lessons and experiences I've had in my life to help other coaches and impact even more kids than just my team or just the athletic department that I was an athletic director for. So I wanted to maybe have a little bit bigger platform or maybe have a little bit bigger influence and use my experiences, both good or bad. A couple of years ago, I was working with a Division I basketball team, and their coach said, "Hey, Jamy, we considered maybe a couple other people in your space or in the leadership space that maybe have written more books or maybe have a bigger name at this point. But we chose you because you have been at all these different levels. You've coached men and women. You've been a head coach. You've been an assistant coach. You've been an athletic director. You've also had, big budgets. You've also had small budgets." And then I started thinking about all that. And it's like, yeah, that's, I do think that I can offer something that maybe some other people can't. Hopefully, is that, I can speak. I know, Brian, you were at the Big Ten level. Now you're at the junior college level. Those are two entirely different budgets. Those are entirely different environments and cultures. Well, you would be much better prepared to help out other coaches across the country because you've had those different levels or those different perspectives. And so that's what I started thinking was that, all right, I've been at all the different levels, coached men and women. I've won Coach of the Year honors. I've also gotten fired. I've traveled nicely, and I've driven 15 passenger vans after losses when the kids in the back are complaining about you, and they're also having to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I've kind of been where so many coaches and leaders have been at, that I can kind of relate to what they're going through. And so my hope is that I'm able to help some coaches out and help some leaders out to be better in what they're doing.
Yeah, that's it's very uncommon, but I could speak on that a little bit. With my background, people ask me what one of my strengths are. I say my diversity. So having been at the highest level and being basically the low man on the totem pole, either as a student manager, student assistant, or doing all the grunt work, showing up early, leaving late, not be too big for any job, but yet I was still hopping on a private plane. Then you go to a junior college level or even a mid-major level where you got to drive 2 hours to an airport, sit in an airport for 2 hours, drive somewhere, have a layover. By the time you get to the next location, it's 10 hours and a lot of time on a bus or a plane and doing those things. And now at the JUCO level, I had to drive a van to our game the other night. So, it's a humbling thing, but at the same time, I think it helps shape who we are and helps us understand, hey, how to relate to different types of people and experiences and speak on those experiences. So having you been a coach or an administrator, what are some things that you wish you would have known then that you know now, or easier to say now than what you didn't know back then? Or what are some things that coaches you find are the most common that we are messing up, or mistakes that we're technically making?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I do think we as coaches make a lot of mistakes. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we make, and we can come back to this in more detail a little bit later, because it relates to the book that you want to talk about, our new book, The Captain. But I'll touch upon it briefly now, is that we think that we're leaders, or we think we're going to have an impact just because we're in charge. We act like we're in charge. We're control freaks. We think people should listen to us and do what we say because we have this title, or because we have this status, or we might even say, well, we've earned this. But that's not true leadership. That's not how you inspire people. If you're a high school coach, your 16-year-old doesn't care what your resume is, or doesn't care if you're in charge, if they don't trust you. And, if you're a college kid, they're not going to run through a wall for us just because we say do it. Those days are over. And so I think that's a major mistake that we're making as coaches and as leaders, is that just because we have a title, we expect people to do what we tell them to do, and then everything's going to be rainbows and butterflies. It doesn't matter how much we know unless they know how much we care. And I know that's a cliche, but that's also something that I learned early on. I was 27, a head coach at the NCAA level. I felt like I deserved it. I felt like I earned it. I'd done everything up to that point to be a young coach and get their first head coaching opportunity. I was a graduate assistant at Kent State University for Gary Waters, an amazing coach. He could sell ice to Eskimos. The dude was a motivator. He cared about kids. I got to see how he built that program at Kent State, and then he went on to Rutgers. And then I went and worked for a guy who won like a bajillion games at the junior college level at Kankakee Junior College, but he was now a coach at Anderson University in Indiana. His name was Denny Lanus, and I went and worked for Denny Lanus, and I learned so much from him. And I dove into that. I took hold of, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to move up the ladder as fast as I can. I want to be a coach that rises. I want to be a rising coach. I want to get and advance as quick as possible. And in those 5 years, I made a total of $36,000 total in 5 years. And that was 2 of those years I was married, and my wife was a bank teller, which means she didn't make much money. So I made $36,000 total in 5 years. But I was almost a Siamese twin to my head coaches, to the other staff members. Like that was all that I did. And so, a long story to bring it back to, I felt like I had done everything possible to be ready to be a head coach. Now, first of all, you're never ready to be a head coach. I don't care what anyone says, they're wrong. You're not ready to be a head coach, just like you're not ready to be married. You might be more prepared than someone else. You might be more prepared than you were last year, but you're never truly ready to be a head coach. But I thought I was ready. And so I go in there. I do care about people. I do value leadership, but you know what I valued more? I valued myself. And I valued rising in the profession. I valued advancing. I valued how people looked at me as a coach. I'm a young coach trying to prove myself. That is what I valued even more than the players and more than leadership. I thought I was being a good leader. I thought I was leading by example, but what I really was doing was being a little selfish and putting my desires ahead of the team. And I kind of forgot all those lessons that coaches poured into me with. And so it really took, after 4 years of being a head coach, it took me getting resigned. In other words, my boss let me take my talents elsewhere. And it really took getting resigned to realize that, you know what, I haven't really been doing what I even got into coaching for. This isn't like playing Madden or NBA 2K. I mean, this isn't like just go out there and prove I'm smarter than everybody else. It's about the people. And I really wasn't making it about the people. I was making it about one person, and that was me.
That's unique in how you present that. And, as a coach, it's not telling somebody to do something and they do it. It's modeling the way. It's having them understand the controllable behaviors and understand what's bigger than what we're trying to do, and get back on that purpose or that passion of why we do what we do, instead of the other stuff that you talked about, the materialistic things and the stuff that comes with the job and the ego and all the other things. It's refreshing to hear that. Now, how would you compare that message, in terms of head coaches making those mistakes and maybe even assistants, to that, the player, or, to the lower level guys trying to climb? What would you tell them, even though we think like that and we do want that next job and we do want to continue to move? Yeah, we do want to get better, but this industry is so bitter at times and so hard to compare and all those things. What would you say about those?
What I have to say is it's pretty simple, but not easy to do. And the simplicity of it is, if you do your job awesome right now, if you pour into the people that are around you right now, if you make people better, if you become so valuable that people want you around, then your next job interview is going to take care of itself for the most part. You're going to eventually be more wanted by other athletic directors or other head coaches. You're not going to have to spend hours and hours and days upon days preparing for your next interview, because the last year you've been preparing for this interview, because all you're going to do is show them a glimpse and let them come into your life and show them who you are, show them what you've been doing with these athletes or with your fellow colleagues in the last year or the last 2 years. This is who I am. This is internalized. This is my passion. This is why I do what I do. And they're going to tell that this isn't just something that Brian crammed for the test for. He didn't just prepare for this interview. This interview, we could have had this interview a week from now. We could have had this interview a week ago and not even told him, just called him up out of the blue. And he's going to be who he is in this interview. And this is who we're going to get as a coach. So I say it's simple, even though I kind of went on there, but it is simple in terms of do your stinking job really, really well. But more importantly, invest in the people, because that's what it's about. Most of us are not going to get rich, even the Division I coaches. You're going to make more money than maybe a Division III coach, but most of us aren't going to get rich in this business. But where we can be rich is our relationships and the people. And we say it's about the people, but then we treat the dude at the end of the bench, whose best friend is the water cooler and the athletic trainer. We treat them like a pariah, or we don't have time for them because they're not going to help us get a raise. They're not going to help us get a better job. Well, that's not the way you go about it. And at the very least, that dude, his best friend might be a starter. So if you treat him bad, he might talk bad about you to the starter at the very least. But I think that shouldn't even come into your mind. It just should be, how do we treat our people? And as basketball coaches, we don't have, it's not a football staff or a football team. We don't have 100 guys out there. We have young ladies and young men, a big enough roster where we can handle them. We can talk with them. We can connect with them. And I think we don't always do a good job of doing our current job well. And so then we don't get the job we want later on because we haven't really been investing, and we're almost fake. And I hate to be that frank about it, but most of us as coaches are pretty fake. We're in it for ourselves. We have our own ego, our own agenda. And then we have this interview. for a job we really want, and we're trying to prepare for it. And I use air quotes, we're preparing for it. Well, we're trying to be something in that interview that we're not. We're trying to give them something that they want to hear. Well, we should have been for the last year is being the type of coach that they would want to hire, not trying to be in one interview the type of coach that they would want to hire. And people talk, custodians talk, sports information directors talk, head coaches talk. Word will get out eventually. But even at that, just your interview, and I know you guys do a great job preparing people for interviews. It's a whole lot easier to prepare for an interview if that's just who you are, if it's internalized. I do a lot of speaking, and people will say, man, how do you memorize speeches? I can never memorize a speech. Well, most of the time you internalize it. Like what you say on stage or what you say to a sports team is internalized. That's what you truly believe. You don't have to memorize things that's part of you. You don't have to memorize talking points if that's really what you believe.
Yeah, I love that. And, being authentic in ourselves and figuring out who we are as a coach takes a lot of time, and you're constantly going to be changing and learning. But, like you said, your behaviors come before your success. Like Tubby Smith used to say all the time, hey, don't come around saying hello when it's time to say goodbye. Every day is that interview, invest in those people. I love that about the relationship part. And, that's one of the unique things about Rising Coaches and being a member of our organization and, having those genuine, authentic relationships with other coaches. You talked a little bit about the preparation with interview. We have a search firm, we have consulting, we have the tools that are needed to help young coaches learn and continue to grow. And, podcasts like this and other things to give you all of the information, but you still have to do the work. You still have to put in the time. You still have to invest in yourself and continue to get better. So you do a lot of consulting, observing cultures and learning about it. What do you do specifically yourself to continue to get better and continue to move your needle when you're constantly helping others? How do you continue to invest in yourself?
Yeah, constant just trying to learn what is going on with whether it's NIL issues, whether it's diversity issues, whether it's, just talking with coaches and, hey, what's your frustration, Brian? What are you struggling with your team? And it's not holding on to what I did 25 years ago. It's not holding on to, well, when I was a player, this is how I felt, or this is what we did. Yeah, it might still be real. It might still be the case nowadays, but constantly observing, seeing different perspectives, seeing different points of view, and trying to learn as much as possible, essentially being a coachable coach. And sometimes we as coaches aren't very coachable, but even in my space as a consultant working with different sports teams, I can't go in there with all stories, let's say, of Michael Jordan. I can't bore the kids to death with Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain and, John Havlicek stories. It's almost getting to the point where you can't talk to them much about Kobe Bryant stories, or Allen Iverson stories or whatever. I mean, you got to keep it fresh, and you got to constantly be knowing what's going on in the world today of sports and the world today in general, and just keeping your finger on the pulse of how things are going on. You continue to write books, you continue to have podcasts, and continue to write blog articles, and almost everything I write, almost everything I say is I'm trying to help out others, but also I'm speaking to myself too, because if I'm trying to help Brian as a coach, okay, you bring me in to either speak with your staff, you bring me in to speak with your team. Yeah, I'm trying to help you guys. And I'm speaking to you as a coach, I'm speaking to your players as athletes. But every day, if I'm not learning stuff as a leader, then I can't, if I'm not putting that in, I'm not going to have that then to pour out into you guys. And I have to be, just like I talked about with interview preparation, if I'm just cramming for the test, if I'm just going to Southwest Mississippi, or I'm going to, Duke, it doesn't matter. If I'm just cramming for the test and all of a sudden I'm just going to wing it on the, I'm just going to prepare something on the plane traveling to you guys and then just wing it, that's not going to be as effective, obviously. But if I'm constantly today working on, all right, how can I be a better leader to my family? How can I be a better, be more wise in the way that I answer emails, be more wise in the way, the things I put on social media? How can I be better personally? Now that's going to then pour out into you guys as well, because maybe I'm not coaching technically X's and O's anymore, but I'm still coaching my son. I'm still coaching my wife, or leading my wife, leading my son. I'm still having to have discussions with family members who may not agree with me on politics or sports or religion or whatever it is. Well, I have to be wise with them, and I have to see their perspective, and I have to act a certain way and behave a certain way with them. Well, that's the same way coaches are supposed to be doing it with their athletes as well. So I have to live it out myself in order to be able to help you guys to then live it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And continuing to learn and invest in yourself is extremely important. And one of the reasons one thing that attracted me to you in terms of, your social media presence. And, I love Twitter, and I use alerts a lot, and finding, different people that can fill my timeline with positive things and things that continue to make me better. And I'll see them, every morning when I wake up, or whatever my routine is to look at social media. So you do a phenomenal job with your social media, especially your Twitter at Coach Beckler. Where do you come up with your materials? What are some of your influencers? Why do you pick those people? Do you have a favorite quote or message that you've put out there that you continue to go back to? Talk a little bit about your social media presence and how you utilize it to help make others better, and in essence, free or building your brand.
Well, I appreciate you following us. I appreciate you supporting us with that. I'm a twit. That's the main social media I use. I'm dabbling in Instagram now, but I'm really struggling to get the right, angle on the food pictures, and really, I don't really have a face or a body for Instagram. So I'm really struggling at that right now, but the Twitter, I've seemed to gravitate toward that. And it's been a long time coming. We've built up a following over the years. People have enjoyed what we've put out, like you said, and we try to keep it positive. We've never bought followers. We've never done any like real crazy things to get followers. Just people have liked the positivity that we put out. And, if you follow our Twitter account, most of the time, you're not going to know if I'm vacationing. You're not even going to know where I'm speaking. If I'm working with your team, you're not going to know that as much. You're not going to know what teams I root for. You're not going to know who I think should win the SEC, championship or whatever. You're not going to know that stuff. You're not going to know who I voted for. We try to keep things positive. We try to put things on Twitter that are going to help coaches, leaders, educators, essentially, and student athletes. And so we've tried to do a really good job with that. Where the stuff comes from, I would love it. I would love to be able to say, well, I have somebody working full time with me that's putting all that stuff together. I don't. It's all me. And so what that means is sometimes I swing and I miss. There's going to be some times where I post something and I'm like, man, this is awesome. This is going to get 1,000 retweets. This is going to be awesome. And then it's crickets. It's like 12 retweets or something or whatever. I don't know. But it's like crickets. And then there'll be something else. It's like, yeah, I got to put something out, but I don't really like this. And then all of a sudden, it seems like everybody likes it and is commenting on it. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't think that was a very good one. That was like, not my A game. I wasn't on my A game that day when I put that together. But, it's kind of hit or miss sometimes. But we do try to keep it positive. We try to put stuff out there that people are going to be inspired by, and it can help them. I will say, and this is kind of not necessarily a sore subject, but it does frustrate me sometimes. I will have on my Twitter, some messages will be directed towards players or athletes. Some messages will be directed toward coaches. I know that the majority of our audience is coaches. The coach messages get retweeted and the engagement on those much less than when I'm essentially lecturing to players. And what I don't like about that, and where I get frustrated with that, is I think that plays into the mentality sometimes of that coaches aren't coachable. Coaches don't necessarily always want to hear that they're not doing something well, but they want to hear that, excuse me, they want to see something that they can give to their players. And I will give you a perfect illustration of this. I tweeted out something that said something to the effect of, uh, if you want to play hard in the games, you can't practice soft or something like that. Or if you want to be, I forget exactly what it was, but essentially, as for a player, if you want to play, then you got to work hard in practice, essentially. And lots of people like that. That got retweeted, shared a lot. Well, I followed that up with something to the effect of, coaches, if you want a player to play hard in practice, then you need to have engaging practice, inspire them, and quit having boring practices. And I'm paraphrasing. Okay, that got crickets because coaches don't want to hear that. But the fact of the matter is, why would you expect a 16-year-old to stay engaged and focused and intense for 2 hours? Their attention span is like 7 seconds. Why would we expect them to do that, especially when we just put that practice together on a little index card or a Post-it note, or it's up here in our head? We have a boring practice. We have so many boring practices, and yet we expect our kids to have a 2-hour attention span. I say shame on us. And that's why sometimes those tweets don't get as much traction as I think they should, because as coaches, we need to be coachable. And as coaches, we need to be the ones that are stepping up and inspiring our kids, not the other way around. Don't expect a 16-year-old to come to practice inspired. Why would you expect that? That doesn't happen. We weren't like that, even though our memories fade, and we think we were the perfect athlete when we were 16 or when we were a freshman in college. We were, the hardest worker and always motivated. That wasn't the case. So we shouldn't expect them to do the same thing. And so that's kind of my soapbox. Sorry for going off on a tangent on you on that, Brian, but from a positive standpoint, we need to constantly be learning what we can do better as coaches as well, so that our athletes will be better as athletes.
Yeah, we need more people like yourself that are teaching us what that looks like. And then we have to continue to be coachable and teachable as well. And talking a little bit about, having fun in practice, something that we do with my staff is we'll write up our practice, and let's say it's 90 minutes. Hey, we'll look and we'll be like, we got to cut 20. What can we cut? Or we'll get to practice and we'll say, hey, we want to do this warm up, one of these 3 warm up drills. I'll just ask the team. We'll do an energy ball handling where, hey, for 1 minute, we're just going to have fun, like knock out with the ball, different stuff, just to like kind of make things fun, exciting, and they get a little bit more juiced about it. And especially when they have a little input in practice and things like that, I think it really helps. It makes it more fun for us too, because a group of inexpired kids, kids that aren't inspired to do what you want them to do, you have to continue to model that way as well.
Well, why can't we? And I'm sorry to cut you off, Brian, but or to expand on this, but why can't we have fun practices? Like, I don't understand. Why can't we have music at practice? Why can't we have more competition? Why can't we do more silly games? I mean, we do that at summer camp. Summer camp, we try to have fun with the campers. Well, why do we do that? Well, because they're young. Okay, I get that they're young, but so are our players. And our players, once again, don't have long attention spans. Think about us. I mean, think about all the in-service trainings we've gone to. Think of all the boring meetings we've gone to. We're not engaged. We're bored. We don't focus. And yet we expect our kids to focus when we're going through this drill for the 90 millionth time, or they're not playing. They know no matter what they do in practice, they're not going to play in a game. So why should they be engaged? We need to find creative ways all the time. And that might mean a little bit extra preparation on our part. It might mean that, we need to make sure that we're prepared for this drill. Most of the coaches listening to this right now, Brian, I'm sure this is for you too. This was true for me. We came up through the ranks going to camps. Maybe we worked at camps, a Michigan camp or a Duke camp or a Jay Billis camp or a 5-star camp, whatever it was. Well, a lot of times at these camps, they would talk about, make sure you don't have kids standing around. Never have kids standing around. They get bored. And now it might be because parents are paying for it. They don't want the kids to get bored, but, make sure you have enough balls for your drill. Make sure you're ready for this so kids aren't bored. It should be no different for our practices, and you mentioned knockout, play knockout. Well, that's a camp game. Well, yeah, it's also an offensive rebounding game. Some of your teams can't shoot a lick, so you probably should practice offensive rebounding, practice knockout. They can't make it anyways. Practice going and getting the ball. Yeah. Our team, we led the nation in rebounding a couple times, but my last team, the last year of me coaching, we set an NAIA record. a plus 19.9 rebound margin for the year. So essentially we out rebounded opponents for the whole year, 20 rebounds a game. All right. National record. Now I joke with people and they're like, well, how'd you do that? Well, we played knockout all the time. Now, the other way to offensive rebound real well is to recruit bad shooters. And I definitely did a good job of recruiting bad shooters. And so your offensive rebounding is going to be up. But we did a lot of fun things for rebounding. And we did a lot of fun things in practice. We would have half court shooting drills. We would have contests for, who's going to be the Grant Hill, who's going to throw that long pass to Christian Leitner. Those are little fun things you can do, but think about it too. Special situations, end of the game. You have to throw a long pass. Who's throwing that long pass? Is it the person on paper, that 3 person, or whoever's taking the ball out? Or do you know exactly who your best thrower is? Do you know who plays a different role? Who does best in this situation? You could have contests for those kind of things. So just music. I mentioned that music. Just do all kinds of things. Try to make it a little bit more fun and get them engaged. Have them name drills or even come up with drills. Have them coach or lead some parts of practice. Start off slow, start off small, but get them more engaged in practice.
Yeah, that's awesome. 2 stories came to mind when you were talking. So when I worked at University of Minnesota with Tubby Smith, we led the nation in offensive rebounding percentage. And we used to joke in practice, just don't turn it over. You can get a good shot or a bad shot, or you could turn it over. Like there's nothing in between. So we would our best offense was get a shot and go get it. And then the other part, you talked about the long pass drill. So we won a game. Our walk-on threw the pass in the Big Ten tournament. We beat Indiana, and we threw the ball all the way across. Our walk-on came in to throw the pass just because he was good at throwing the baseball pass, and we hit a shot in the Big Ten tournament, and it worked. And we found that out in practice that he could throw the pass the best.
Well, some guys might curve the ball. Maybe they can throw the ball great, and you think, oh, they're a great athlete, or even maybe they were a quarterback or they were a baseball pitcher, and you never thought to even really see when push comes to shove if they can throw it accurately. Especially and I coached a lot of females at the female game. Well, not every female can throw at the length of the court. So you need to find that out as well. Some of them maybe put more arc on it. Some of them it's a flatter ball. So you got to figure these things out as a coach. And those are some things you can do just to have fun in practice, but you're also doing it for a purpose, for that one time, in February that you're going to need such and such play. You figure that out. But just figure out ways to make things fun. If you're going to play, even at the Division I, you can relate this, going into a big arena may be different than your 3,000 seat gymnasium that you have, so maybe try to find an arena that you can practice at. Or, if you're going, small college, Brian, you probably have this a lot. You'll go into a gym that's either, it's like, almost freezing in there, it's almost 32 degrees, it seems like, or it might be like 110 degrees. It might be a sauna in there. Or you go to someplace where we would go to this place called Talladega College in Alabama. And Talladega College put their band right behind the visiting team's bench. And I swear they weren't band members. I swear none of those people knew how to play their instrument. They just blew as hard as they could. And so you can't think, you can't hear in a timeout. They're just blasting, just mere feet away from you. Okay, well, I say all that. Well, maybe if you're going into an environment like that, or you're going to have a situation where the lighting's really bad and that ahead of time, well, duplicate that in practice. Do some fun things in practice that gets them prepared for that environment that they're going to go into. And that then also cuts out the tediousness of your practice. It breaks up practice a little bit. It's just a little bit different.
For sure. Having that fun and being intentional with those words and timing what you do, I think all really important things that you hit on. So I'm going to put a time limit on you for the next one in 45 seconds or less. Talk a little bit about your podcast, Success is a Choice. Why is it called Success is a Choice? And what do you try and, where do you get your guests? Just talk a little bit, plug your podcast for 45 seconds. Go.
From the moment Rick Pitino's book, Success is a Choice, came out years ago. That was the slogan of every one of my teams I ever coached. I thought that was so perfect. Success is a choice. We choose all the time what we're going to do, and those become habits. Our choices become habits. And so when I was looking to have a podcast, it was a no-brainer. I'm going to use success as a choice. That's always been our slogan. And our podcast is different. It's not a basketball podcast, not a sports podcast, not a business podcast. It's a life podcast. And so, I think 1 week we had a pastor. The next week we have a pussycat doll. And then the next week we have Phil Hellmuth, who's a poker champion. So we're all across the board. We've had so many different guests. And now we've started even doing smaller segments as well, like 2-minute segments, 5-minute segments, talking about different things. So we have fun, and we try to give listeners a whole variety of guests and topics that they can listen to.
That's awesome. Yeah, that we have, just like our players, we don't have that long of an attention span either. In that 60 to 75 seconds, if you can, instead of word vomiting on people, you can get a lot more done in those quick segments. So that's unique, uncommon, and I like that a lot. So you've written, 4 books, is that correct?
Yes.
4 books. Yes. Okay. So your most recent one, The Captain, I know you're a big fan of one of your first books, the bus trip. Talk to us a little bit about, your inspiration. I know The Captain is geared in different directions and different things. And you were talking about a couple of things. You just put out an article. So, one of the characters within a couple of the books is based off your dad. And then I laughed talking with you. You mentioned Michigan a couple of times. And then the quarterback's name is Brady Thomas. And I just had to laugh at that. And I kind of put 2 and 2 together as I learned more information about you and did some homework. But talk to us a little bit about your books. How are they written? Where do you come up with your ideas? How can somebody find your books? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. When I first started off coaching, I wanted to write books. I just didn't think I was very good at it, or would never be very good at it, especially according to my English teacher in high school. I definitely wasn't destined to be a writer, but I have all these ideas of books, and I just kept putting it off. And then when I became an entrepreneur 5 years ago, I decided I need to start writing books. And so I started doing that. I want to write books that help student athletes and that helps coaches to have a tool to use with their student athletes. So for instance, the first fictional book, the first 2 were nonfiction. First 2 books were nonfiction. My last 2 books have been fiction. And so we did the bus trip, and that was kind of encompassing our overall philosophy that every single person on the team can be a leader, because everyone can influence. It doesn't matter what your role is, your talent level, your status, your position. It doesn't matter. You can still be an influencer on your team, because everybody has a friend on the team. And even if that's the only person you're influencing, that's now one extra person. And we look at it like the wave at a major sporting event, a football event. If we go to a football stadium, they do the wave. It's never a situation where they come across a loudspeaker and say, all right, we're going to start in section 23 and you're going to do the wave. No, it's normally one drunk yahoo who gets another drunk yahoo, who gets another drunk yahoo. And before you know it, there's like 80,000 screaming yahoos that are doing the wave. And nobody knows if it's the tallest, the shortest, the fattest, the ugliest, the prettiest, the richest, the poorest. No one knows who started it, but one person got someone else who got someone else. And that's how we look at leadership, is that on every single team, Brian, you might not be able to lead all 15 kids at one time, like you're some Hollywood hero leading everybody into battle. But what you might be able to do is you might be able to lead your roommate to do what they're supposed to do. And eventually that's going to wear off, and maybe your roommate, or that's going to be a snowball, and your roommate then will lead somebody else, who will then lead somebody else. And eventually the whole team's doing something right, not because you as the freshman stood up and made this great speech, but because you did your job and you got one other person to do their job as well. So that was the bus trip. Then we took, and the book that just came out, The Captain, we wanted to dive more deep into, all right, when you do have a position of leadership. Yes, everybody can be a leader, but people that are in positions of power, people that are talented, people that have status, they have a bigger platform. They have a little bit more responsibility. And so we wanted to talk to them. So it's directed at players, but coaches, I just had one coach email me yesterday that said, I got this for my players, but as I read it, I started feeling guilty because I'm not doing what I should do as a positional leader. I'm like, yes, great. You got that too. That's what I want. but it was written for players. But essentially this star quarterback turned hotshot fighter pilot, always been the most talented. He won the Heisman Trophy, always been a captain, but he's never been a good leader. He's never inspired people. Even though he was a hard worker, he was talented, he had charisma, people didn't follow him because he was about himself. And so we wrote this book, and by the end of the book, he realizes that he hasn't been a real leader. He hasn't been doing what he needs to do to make others better and to inspire his team, to inspire the people around him. And so my hope for this book is that, your captains could read it, or your talented players, your star players could read it and realize, you know what, it means more than just me. Like, the team needs more than just me to do my job. I have to help other people do their job as well.
Yeah. Clarity gives you power. I've read The Captain, and, it was a good book, quick read. I did it on, one night before bed and on a flight. So, I read the book fairly quickly, and, the impact and the clarity that you use within the word choices and the story. And I think you paint a really clear picture throughout it, in both. You're telling kind of two stories at the same time, interacting every other chapter, and how you organize that, I thought was really powerful. And, it kind of made me think, and there was a couple guys on my team that I was like, this is really good for them. And, instead of, I gotta get them the book, but I sent them basically my Spark notes from the book of what I highlighted, and, sent it to them, and they read it. And, I constantly send things to guys, but you don't know if it's always being received in the right way, or if they actually read it, or different things. But I thought the book was very effective and very clear with how you painted a picture.
I appreciate it. And this is something that we all deal with. We all deal with captains. We all deal with star players, and sometimes they're the same people, sometimes they're not. But we have this problem as coaches ourselves. Once again, going back to being a coachable coach, do we have this position and we think we're in charge? We think we're in control. We have this power so that it benefits us, so that, we have this ego and we want people to follow us and do what we tell them to do because we know better? Or are we going to get people to do what they need to do because they're inspired by us and because they would do this for us, whether we were in charge or not, just because they respect us, they trust us, they believe in us? And a lot of times our kids don't believe in us. They don't trust us and they don't respect us because all we are is a positional leader. And John Maxwell talks about 5 levels of leadership, and the positional leadership is the lowest level. That's the baseline. People follow us because they have to. And that's not, most programs that are uber successful, the best cultures out there, more than likely have leaders or coaches that are more servant leaders, and that the kids are inspired and follow them because they want to, not because they have to.
Yeah. And the power of influence within leadership, I think, is really important and effective. If you can get to that parachute type where they, regardless of what you say, and they believe so much in what you're doing and what you're saying and the best interest that they have, you have in them, they'll jump out of a plane without a parachute, knowing that you got their back and having them. So I think that's really, really powerful stuff, and appreciate you sharing your words through a book, regardless of what your English teacher told you in high school. So good stuff. So I have, to kind of wrap everything into perspective, I have these 1-minute questions. I call them impactful questions that I like to ask within the podcast. And you can talk as long as you need to, but, kind of rapid fire questions at you. So what lessons have taken you the longest to learn in your life?
Oh, wow. Should I go get my wife to answer this one?
You might have 100. We could have another hour of a podcast probably.
That's right. That would be a much better podcast. And by the way, she's much better for Instagram than I would be. She's smarter. She's better looking. But, it took me way, way, way too long to realize that as a leader, as a coach, it's not about me. It's about what can I do to help develop and empower our athletes to be the best that they can be and to be leaders themselves and to believe in them. And it just took way too long. It was, I know better. I know best. I know what Brian needs more than Brian does. And I'm smarter than the players. As a coach, you should be smarter than them. You should be the smartest person in your locker room. But that doesn't mean that you getting your way or you being right all the time is in the best interest of your kids. And it took way too long for me to realize. I need to communicate with them, but not just one way, not just me telling them, but I need to really listen to them, learn to listen and listen to learn, and listen to what they want, listen to what their hopes and fears and dreams and all that kind of stuff is, so that you can better inspire them and motivate them.
Yeah. Listen to actually listen rather than respond. And, do you want to win more than you want to be right? And a lot of times coaches have that problem. And we talk about it a lot with our players, with things that they're doing and saying, and not being as coachable or teachable. But also, too, there'll be instances where we as leaders have to assume that responsibility and model the way and show them what it looks like to be quote unquote humble or be coached. Admit when we're wrong, even though it hurts at times and we don't want to admit it. I think that stuff's really powerful. And thank you for sharing that. Give us something that you believe in that others may think is weird.
You mean like flat earth or the boogeyman or
maybe
elf on the
not
shelf?
that extreme, but like maybe something that you do unique in your life that other people don't do, or very uncommon, either actions or choices, or just something that you truly believe in that people are like, what? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to be real quick on this. Oh, that's scary to say that. I'm gonna give you three things. Number one is I believe that one thing that I do is I see other people's perspectives pretty well. That is something that I do really well. And I think that that's something that all coaches and leaders should be doing. We should not necessarily, I'm right, you're wrong, you're right, I'm wrong type thing, but I see your perspective. I see your point of view. And that's something that's not always been there for me. But I'm getting much better at that. Or I've gotten to the point where I'm probably doing that. And I don't think a lot of leaders do that. I think a lot of leaders say, I know what you should be believing, or I know the best way to go about this. It's the understanding part. We got to understand people. Secondly, I've come around on these two things since I've been a coach. Number one, everybody can be a verbal leader. I don't think everybody believes that. I 100% believe that now. Every single person can be a verbal leader, no matter your role, unless you do not have a tongue, unless you literally can't speak. Everybody can be a verbal leader. And I'll tell you the three ways you can be a verbal leader. Number one is you can inform. Hey, Brian, we're meeting in the locker room instead of the weight room. Okay, I just led you by verbally informing you of something. So inform. Number two, you remind. You can remind. Hey, Brian, remember when you said this was your goal? Yeah, what are you doing to work toward that? Or remember when this happened? Or remember when we worked hard back in August? Man, that's for this moment right now. Or remember in the last game, or remember on Tuesday, you did this in practice. That's why I know you can do this, man. I believe in you. We can remind our teammates of something, or more importantly, we can remind our friends of something. And I use that word instead of accountability. I don't think our players should hold each other accountable from a traditional sense. It's a scary word. I like the word reminding. You remind them of stuff. You remind them of their goals. You remind them of what they said. And then the third way they can be a verbal leader is encouraging. Everybody can encourage. So that's something I've changed my mind on over the years, is that everybody can be a verbal leader. The final thing is, I try not to say the phrase buy-in. I try not to say the phrase buy-in anymore. Now, I still do it once in a while out of habit. I don't believe that we should be getting our kids to buy into stuff. I think we should do everything we can to create an environment where they're taking ownership in stuff. Now, it's a very slight, subtle semantical thing. But when we're trying to get our kids to quote unquote buy in, it's still Coach Beckler's thing. It's Coach Beckler's play. It's Coach Beckler's culture. It's Coach Beckler's desire. I'm buying into what Coach said. Once again, that's the compliant follower thing. I don't want compliant followers. I want positive leaders on my team. If I got 15 kids, I want 15 positive leaders. And you're not always going to get that if they're buying in. I want them to take ownership. This is our team. We win together, we lose together, we overcome obstacles together, we celebrate successes together. This is our team. We're together in this. It's not Coach Beckler's and you're just pawns. And so I've tried to get out of that buy-in thing. And I don't think buy-in is bad. I think it's a mentality of us versus them, coach, players, and it should be us together.
Yeah, just to jump on a couple of things that you said, I think that's really important. And if you're taking notes during the podcast, that would be, you know, a take home point. But, you know, reminders are only good after they're needed. And, you know, or before they're needed. I said that backwards. Reminders are only, you know, before they're needed. But, you know, going along with that, you know, using positive talk, you know, we talk that a lot in our culture and in what we do within our program is if it's not positive, you're either helping or hurting the team. And so how you use those word choices and what you do, everything that you do matters. You know, but continue to not remind them constantly of what to do, but hey, the reason why they're doing it, the purpose behind it and what we're doing, and utilizing that as motivation, and create more leaders, not followers. You know, that's the end goal in a lot of things that we do as leaders and as coaches. So your life, you know, it's taken a lot of, you know, twists and turns, roller coasters, done coaching, done a lot of different things, made minimal money like you talked about. What's the best thing in the world that can happen to you right now? Someone that from the outside may think, oh yeah, great, you know, thing that he's in impacting others and doing all these things. What's the best thing in the world that can happen to you right now?
That my kid stays out of jail. No, I mean, I have a 12-year-old and I worry about what kind of country he's going to live in. I worry about the decisions he's going to make. I worry about, you know, am I going to be a good parent? Because 12 years ago, I was an awesome parent. And then once we had a son, I realized I'm an idiot when it comes to parenting. So I worry about, am I going to be a good parent? So the best thing that can happen to me is that my son is respectful, that my son has good manners, that he might not get good grades, but all of his teachers say he's a joy to have in class. You know, maybe he struggles in something, but you know, that's the kind of stuff that is pretty much the best thing that can happen is when a teacher says, you know, he got a C because he's struggling, but man, he works hard. He never gives us problems. He's very polite. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am type thing. That to me is to me, that's the best thing. That's the best thing I can hear typically.
Yeah. Create good leaders and good people. You know, the world just needs, and we need better people that make better decisions, that have understanding and awareness. And then the last question for you. So is there anything that, you know, you wish I would have asked that I haven't, or things, you know, you went on a little soapbox earlier, but, you know, from a rising coach's perspective, so it's still a rising coaches podcast and we get a variety of different listeners. You know, there's people like myself that, you know, are head coaches at the college level and do different things and continue to invest and learn. But there's the, you know, the beginning stages of managers and even high school coaches. And, you know, if you know, even NBA guys and Division I assistants and coaches are involved in our organization. But, you know, what is something that you can kind of send us home with, or, you know, something, a challenge for us over the next 24 hours or something along there, or something that I didn't ask that you can kind of go on about?
Yeah. And because it's rising coaches, I would say this is that I had an amazing track record of getting job offers when I got interviewed. Now I batted like next to nothing for getting interviews. I'm sure a lot of people are in the same boat. You know, you send out like 3 million applications and you never hear from people. But I think my record was like 11 of 13 on interviews at 4-year schools that I got offers. Doesn't mean I took them all, but I was very good at interviews. And one of the reasons I was decent was because I knew my stuff. I knew me. I knew what I was about. I knew my why. But the other thing was I painted pictures for people. I shared stories, real stories. I didn't dabble in hypotheticals. I shared real stories, painted pictures, presented a narrative to them. And I always stayed on point. I always stayed on brand. And this, I think, is a very important thing for people to understand. Even though I can go off on a tangent right now in a podcast interview, in a job interview, I'm staying on my talking, or not necessarily talking points, but I'm staying on what I want them to know about me. This is what's most important about me. So maybe I care about the kids or whatever. You got your 3 or 4 things that are most important. When you leave that room, you want them to know about. Well, I'm going to stay on brand with that. I'm going to paint pictures. I'm going to bring every question back to that somehow. And I'm going to have this whole, this whole bucket of stories that I can share with them. So when they ask me about discipline, when they ask me about academics, when they ask me about whatever it is, I'm not going to say, yeah, I believe in discipline, or yeah, I believe our kids should go to class. I'm going to tell them a story about when Brian came to us and he was struggling. He got in on probation, and then we did this, and this, X, Y, and Z. And he ended up becoming an honor roll student, or he ended up graduating, first kid in his family to ever graduate from college. I'm going to have stories, and I'm going to have a story for every topic. And I'm probably going to have a couple stories for every topic, so that depending on what they ask me, I might not know the specific question, but I know the topics they're going to talk about. And I'm going to have stories ready to go that paint a picture of what they're getting when they bring me in as a coach.
Yeah, very intentional with your word choices, and stories paint that picture. And that kind of goes back to your ability to write in those books. Like, that's what I took from the book, is your ability to paint a picture with a specific example, whether it's made up or true. You know, it painted the picture so clearly that it had an effect. And I remember more of the book because of that, because I painted a picture in my mind, and there's triggers that will help you continue to remember what's going on and what's really important. And, you know, that clarity is power again. You know, simple wins. So, well, I really appreciate your time and taking the time to speak with the Rising Coaches podcast and our listeners. And, you know, wish you the best and continue to impact others and do your thing that you love. And I really do appreciate your what you do. You know, we need more people like you that are impacting others and doing so in the right way and understand the background of what we've gone through, you know, or are going through as coaches and as leaders ourselves.
I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Take care.